and then you two can.
Okay. You want me to introduce myself, Jean?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm Michelle Brown. I'm on the Zoning Commission, and I'm a semi-retired bookbinder, book restorer, and I have a home studio. So actually, some of the issues that come up with zoning would affect people like me and, say, other people that work from home. So I'm curious about that. And yeah, I guess that's all I have to say. I've lived here for 25 years.
Okay. Oops. We're going to do the introductions, and then we'll come back for privilege of the floor. So, Barbara?
Hi, I'm Barbara Newth. I have lived in the town of Caroline since 1987. I live here with my family. I am a professor of natural resource policy at Cornell University, and I'm on the Zoning Commission, and I was on the task force looking at land use issues in the fall.
Thank you. Evie? You're on mute.
Thank you. My name is unmuted Evie Weinstein. I've lived in Caroline since 1988. I spent the first part of my life being a seabird biologist on the coast of Maine and teaching ornithology here. But I spend an awful lot of time here now. I'm working as a contact tracer, but also have deep roots to the town. So my interest in zoning is tied to a lot of different things, but I'm glad to be on this commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Bernie?
Hello, I'm Ernie Bales, self-employed architect. Caroline since 1986 and have served previously on the subdivision review board back in the early 2000s.
Okay. Bruce?
Hello, I'm Bruce Murray. I lived in the town my whole life. I'm very interested in the zoning and how the town proceeds with our comprehensive plan. And I'm a local contractor, and that's about it.
Val?
I'm Val Vork. I teach architecture at the College of Architecture, Art and Planning at Cornell. And I've been living here in Caroline since 1988, I think. And I'm on the planning committee usually, and I'm now part of the zoning commission.
Tim Murray?
Hi again, Nan and Rick. I'm Tim Murray. We've met before. I'm on the town board and I'm the liaison to the zoning commission. I've been in Caroline since 1981, and I work at Cornell as the director of the Cornell Council for the Arts and a professor of comparative literature.
Thanks. And Mark is on the call. Mark Whitmer is our supervisor.
Great. Thanks, Jean. Yeah. Yep. Hi, Nan and Rick. Great to have you with us. And so, yeah, I arrived in the area in the 80s and was in Caroline in the 90s. And then my family and I moved back here in early 2000s to raise our two daughters. And I'm actually a biologist by training, also an ornithologist. So I've taught locally at different colleges, and then my life has segued into town government where I am now.
Thanks. And we have three residents attending. So would anyone want to introduce yourselves? You don't have to if you don't want to, but you could. They're all shy. Thanks. And I will ask Nan and Rick to introduce yourselves.
Hi, thank you. My name is Nan Stolzenberg, and I'm really glad to be with you all and to meet you all, or at least to see you all. And I'm really looking forward to working with you. It sounds like you have a really great, diverse, talented zoning commission. And we'll have really good discussions on the future of the town and how to use zoning to meet your goals. So I'm looking forward to helping you as best as I can.
Thanks. And Rick?
I'm Rick Lederer Barnes, working with Nan on this project. Also looking forward to working on this. I'm primarily doing the mapping and analysis that goes along with the project, but I'll be talking about that more later in the meeting.
Thank you. We'll go on to privilege of the floor. Does anyone have anything they want to say? Hearing none, I'll ask for the town council report. Tim.
I've always wanted to be Rick, and it didn't work out. As you can all see, we had a very, very successful search for a planner to assist with the zoning commission. We had really an incredibly robust and impressive set of applicants. We had interviews. Jean joined me and Mark for a smaller number of interviews, and we were extremely impressed with Nan and Rick, and we're very happy that they've joined us. I might mention there was some back channel discussion, I think it was this afternoon, with Jean and Mark regarding public meetings. The governor has still has enforced the closed public meeting law currently it's through June 9th. He does this he's been doing this on a monthly basis, so we don't know if he's going to extend it any further. If he opens it up, the town board has been discussing this, and we really have very mixed opinions about the extent to which we're still comfortable with opening up completely to the public. We're working out a situation in the town hall. Mark's working on this for proper spacing and distancing within the town hall, which is necessarily going to mean some restrictions in terms of the number of people we would be able to accommodate. And we'll do that. I think the town board's pretty comfortable. My hunch is I think it's fairly understood that we'll want to do that regardless of what the governor says. We also have our new AV system, which Mark, if any of you attended the last board meeting, the public hearing that we had over solar last week, Mark tested it out from the town hall. So we have a robust video conferencing system now in the town hall. And our plan is to keep using this even when it's open so that we can have public participation even when people can't or don't want to come in physically to the town hall. Also, we'll probably continue to record these meetings. We haven't discussed this, but my hunch is we'll want to do that. So this is just a plus win-win-win all the way across the board. I also might mention that last week we held a public hearing for our new solar siting plan, which attracted literally 0 participants except for the town board. And as a result of the feedback we received at that public hearing, we then passed the new solar siting law. So that law is in place. So that's all I have to say. Welcome, Nan and Rick. We're looking forward to this.
Great, thank you. And the planning committee update, Val? Val, I think you're muted. Oh, there you are.
Yep, there. Well, the planning committee essentially wrapped up its business with that solar siting law, and that was the what was going on. And I'm not aware of anything else that has happened since our last meeting. That
great.
Reportable.
Nice. Okay. Well, we just whipped through a lot of this meeting, leaving a lot of time for Nan and Rick to talk with us and about what's in the agenda. And so I'm going to just turn it over to Nan.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I look at this meeting as, first of all, I'll get to know you, and a kickoff meeting And I just wanted to go over kind of the basic stages of how Rick and I proposed helping you on the project. I imagine you probably have all seen the proposal. So I don't want to spend a lot of time rehashing all of that. But I think the steps, if we want to make sure that everyone is on board with this, the general steps and approach that we're taking, which are laid out in the proposal. But in general, the phases that we're going to go through is really like the first phase is background research and the basic planning to understand what it is that your goals are, which we are going to be starting from the comprehensive plan, but your own insight into the town is really critical to help make this successful. Rick and I we can learn a lot about the town, but we will never know the town like you know the town. And so the first few meetings in the first phase will be for Rick and I to get up to speed on all your documents, which we have to a large degree already, and to really get to know what the issues and the direction that you want to take in the town are. That basic understanding on the tone, the philosophy, how it's written, how it's organized, all of those things go into making the zoning law something that is understandable and easy for you all and for the folks in the community to use. My approach is not a legalese kind of approach. I try and write them in plain English so that everybody understands what they're all about. And zoning is, it's kind of like a foreign language to most people. So we want to try and make it as straightforward and understandable as possible. The second phase, once we kind of have that background, is Rick will be working with the GIS data and the map layers and working with the zoning commission to work through what the zoning districts and or overlays may be. He'll talk about that a little bit more. And we'll have public input. There's several public meetings that are kind of scheduled throughout at major milestones. I think that from your RFP, we want this to be open and transparent. We want lots of community input. A first zoning law is a big step for a community to take, and we realize that. And we want to be able to listen to what people are interested in, concerned about, so that at the end, we have a document that is usable and acceptable and celebrated, instead of, we don't want a lot of stress over the end product. So between our research and understanding the town and its resources and the goals that you have for the town, I have found over the years of working with I have about 70 communities across New York State that I've done planning in, many of them with zoning, either new zoning or update to zoning. And our approach, and that we talked about in our interview for this work, was we have found that the successful way is for you all to, once we kind of get to know you and know where you want to go, is to draft some language for you to react to. It's very difficult to write zoning as a committee, as I'm sure some of you have been on other committees, have tried to do that. And so what we're going to try and do is have a thorough understanding so that we can put together a first draft section by section with you. And then with no sense of ownership over the exact wording, but it's a place for you all to start and react to. And you might say, well, gee, we don't like that particular section, or we don't like the way that's too robust or not robust enough, and that's fine. But I have found, and I've done it all sorts of different ways, but I have found that giving you something as a starting place, section by section, is the most efficient way to get through putting this together, since we really are starting from scratch. And we want to be careful that there's a ton of really great examples out there. There's a ton of really great planning tools for rural communities. And I think I can offer a lot to you by saying, by putting the tools together as a package, because the tools have to work together. The density and the districts and the regulations all have to work together. But ultimately, it has to fit you guys like a glove. It has to be the right tone and the right level of regulations to work. So we will certainly not going to be giving you text and say, here, this is the way it's got to be, but as our recommendations for you to deliberate, discuss, reject if you need to reject them, and as you reject ideas, we'll come up with new ones. And with public input at the major milestones as we go along, hopefully will lead us to a draft document that will be acceptable to everybody. So we're kind of, those first 3 phases are to get us to that point, and then we'll fine tune. I think the longest part of the process is really something I can't predict. I can't predict how long it will take you all to decide on the various tools that we might suggest, but we'll work through that each meeting, and we'll have materials for you to discuss as we go along. And then the last stage of the process is really the adoption process. And for the first zoning, as I'm sure you've all read your guidelines for zoning laws in New York State, there's a very specific process for the first zoning law and adoption of any local law. If you just did your solar law, you're used to those kinds of public hearing, county planning board review, seeker, and adopting it as a local law. So all of those will work through the adoption steps when we get there. But that will obviously, we're a little ways away from that end point right now. So in the timing that we have on this in general is looking to get to our adoption phase by March and April of next year. So it's a lot of work to do, and I think it's really good that you guys are willing to meet as you have on an every other week basis. There's a lot of things to discuss and a lot of decisions to make on the approach and how you want this to be developed. So it does take time, and I feel that that this is obviously any law is really important, but this really is a milestone for the town, and you should feel like you should take the time to work through and discuss these so you're all comfortable with it, and hopefully that will move things along. So we have about a year time frame or so to get this going. And I'll be honest with you, some communities that I've worked with have been able to move through efficiently and get through it in kind of that kind of time frame. In some communities hit snags, they hit difficulties, they hit areas where they disagree, and it takes time to rethink and rediscuss and make things the way you need them to. So I don't know from the town board's perspective if that end date is like an absolute, but we'll work towards that date, knowing that the community will have faith in the process when they see that it's been deliberated and that they have an opportunity to have input and that you've worked through issues. So that, again, it's my favorite saying is, it's got to fit you like a glove. It doesn't matter what I think in the end, it matters what you think and what you need for your community. So that's in general, the kind of the steps that we'll take you through. So before we move on, are there any comments or questions about this kind of time frame and process in general that you want to jump in with? Someone's raising their hand. I don't know names yet, so.
It's Bruce.
Oh, Bruce, yes.
I'm just wondering what your feel is or what your experience is on how soon we would get the public involved, or at what stage do we get the public involved?
Yes, so the, let me just go back to the proposal. So we have that outlined. We have, the first public meeting was after we have some draft zoning maps done. So again, the public, my experience is that the public does better with reacting to something. They like it, they don't like it, or they have useful and helpful suggestions. So to have something as a starting place that we can explain what the zoning is, what the purposes are, what the potential land uses might be, or regulations that might go with the districts that you have. So unless you, and I'm very flexible, unless you want to change where we engage the public, that's what I had included in the proposal to start with. And then, so the zoning map is kind of a foundation of what the pieces are going to be. And then the second milestone for involving the public would be after you have worked through what are the regulations that might be associated with each one of those districts. So the public can have an opportunity to look at the land uses, look at the setbacks, if you know, or any other dimensions that you might have to go along with those, because basically the zoning districts and the density and the dimensions of lots to move forward, how whatever we end up doing, that the public is and landowners are very interested and concerned about those. So before we move on, we would have public input at that point. And then the third public meeting comes after we have a draft of the document that puts all of the pieces together, followed by a public hearing, which is the zoning commission is required to have a public hearing, and the town board will be required to have an additional public hearing when they go to adopt the law. You may have more than one hearing. I have had communities that have had multiple hearings to get through some things. So that's in general what we proposed. If you have heartburn over that kind of approach, Rick and I are, we can change those up to meet a need, since we're just getting to know you in the community. That was our experience, was good practice, but we're certainly open to other timing on those meetings.
Yeah, I apologize, but Gene, the only thing I got was the outline of the zoning law. I didn't see their proposal. You're muted, Gene.
I had sent that right after the town hired Nan.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll have to pull it up. I didn't see that.
I'll send it out again. I'll just in
Okay.
case. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else on the process?
Just a quick question. I think we are going to also go through a review of our current site plan regulations and how that dovetails into all of this zoning. I mean, I think that's going to be a real key to the town of Caroline anyway, as to how those two things work together, because I see that as probably the most appropriate planning tool for our community is site plan review, as opposed to an actual setbacks and heights and lot coverage kinds of regulations.
We'll have to work through that. Yeah, the site plan is a critical tool in rural, in every community, but in rural communities especially. So yes, I was asked this question, I think by Mark, or I forget who asked it in the interview, how I usually approach site plan and how it's related to zoning. Some communities do have them as separate laws. You have a zoning law and then you have a site plan review law. I prefer to integrate them so that they work together. So we have one process, all in one place, and that they work together. You know, we'll have to work through ultimately to see what other regulations. Maybe ultimately you won't have strict bulk, what's called bulk or other dimensions. But the site plan, you know, certainly is a vital and important tool. I read your current, and I read the task force proposal for the site plan review. So I'm familiar with some of the issues and the updates that you suggested. So I agree, definitely an important piece, and we'll certainly integrate them.
Tim Murray raised his hand as well.
I withdrew my hand because I was just going to remind everybody that the task force in the fall did that thorough mock-up of the site plan review, which Nan obviously has not read. So.
Okay, good. So Nan.
Yes. So the next thing, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, just go on.
I wanted to take a few minutes to, before we get into some details, I just kind of wanted to hear from you, a brainstorm kind of help Rick and I get to know the town. I read your comprehensive plan. I understand what's in the document. I understand the task force. I've read that thoroughly, but I'd kind of like to hear from you. What do you think about the town? What are you worried about? What do you hope this zoning will do? Where do you, just tell me a little bit about what's going on in town that would compel you to be on this zoning commission to work towards. What are some of the concerns? And I just kind of throw that out. And I don't know, Jean, if you want to go around and.
Yeah, I'm going to go around the invisible table. So
Okay,
I'm going to
go
start.
ahead.
I'm going to start with Evie. Evie, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I think I love the way, Nan, you refer to getting to know the culture and the town. That's such a crucial part to go with the other tools. By comparison to some, I haven't lived here that long. 1988, it's not such a long time, but it's long enough to have a sense that this town is characterized by the obvious rural community that we have all agreed we care so much about maintaining. I think there's been a spread into the town of a number of folks who hail from elsewhere, who have a real mix of interests, which is lovely. I think the crucial thing is to make sure that as many people's voices who have a stake in this town, who can have a voice, get to be heard. In conversations in recent months, I am still struck by a sense of empowerment in some community, in some groups of people, and marginalization in others. And I'm not at all surprised by that, meaning that some people feel like they really have a say, others don't. Some are much more comfortable being part of conversations in front of groups. Others have never done so. And I think figuring out, and I would really love to know experiences you've had in different places, how to draw out the voices of those who might not be so typically inclined to be heard in this setting, and then harbor unfortunate feelings. And I'd really like to have as many voices as possible. So that's one of my concerns. The other is that as a biologist and person who really celebrates nature, maintaining and protecting those areas in this town are very, very important. And I know I don't just speak for myself. So There are lots of other things, but those are some big ones.
Okay. Barbara?
Thanks. Yeah, I've lived in the town of Caroline, as I said, since 1987. I've raised a couple of daughters here, and my husband and I have lived here since then. We're attracted to the rural nature, the scenic values, the environmental resources in the community. We like to walk in the scenic outdoor surroundings on roads that we walk on roads frequently that cross 79, but don't walk on 79 because it's such a busy thoroughfare. We enjoy the sense of community that comes with sense of place. Hamlets, particularly Brookendale, has a very active, community center, community-based kind of culture to it. Other hamlets within the town have that character as well. There are I think that sense of keying in terms of zoning, keying in activities of various sorts to the established hamlets, as it was pointed out in the comprehensive plan, is an idea that I would like to see carried out through a zoning ordinance or regulations as appropriate. Similar housing that people should be allowed to have residence in the town of Caroline. It seems like the population of the town of Caroline is growing, and residential uses, I think, should be encouraged. Again, trying to keep with that sense of building a sense of community and having activities that are, more retail activities and gathering activities that are more centered in hamlets, but enabling the residential townspeople to enjoy the rural character and enjoy the environmental amenities and enjoy the scenic amenities that are part of the town culture as well.
Thanks. Ernie?
Boy, I don't know exactly how to address this. I've, been to town board meetings, for many, many years, and I got to say that the town on the outside has really, changed not all that much over the 30 years that I've lived here. Certainly compared to downtown Ithaca, for instance. I can remember some early meetings when if one were to mention the Z word, you would be, run out of the room. It was really just something that nobody was allowed to talk about. And getting those early steps to having a planning board and then subdivision review laws, and then these things have been very painful. And ultimately, I don't know how much they've really changed the way that the town of Caroline has grown. It has grown, not a lot, very little, I think, except for a couple of odd developments. But in view of the fact that development pressures are increasing, it will be important that at least there be some way for the public to be more involved in the decision-making process about what does and does not happen within the town, and this is the logical method for getting to that. I have suffered through a million zoning board meetings and understand how the laws work and how they don't work, and I would like to try to minimize the amount of pain and anguish that we have to go through here once we do adopt zoning, and hope that it is reflective of what this community is, as opposed to something that it maybe wants to be. I don't know. It's kind of all pretty vague, but it's about the best I can do right now. Thank you.
Thanks. Bruce?
Yeah, like I said, I raised 2 boys in this town with my family. My mother and father my father was from Vermont. My mother grew up and lived here. My wife's family lived here the whole time. I'm very interested in maintaining the rural character of the town, the outdoors, the being able to recreate in the wild, things like that. The town hasn't grown all that much, but I think we need to, like Ernie said, the Z word was a tough thing to go on here. I think the sooner we can involve the public, the better off we're going to be. And there's things that have happened in this town. Like, we have some laws on the books to stop certain things from happening, but they just don't seem to work, as far as, say, junk, things like that. I can see where zoning can help, but I'm not sure exactly how. I'm open to, the whole thing, and hopefully it will work out. But I think, myself personally, the sooner we get the public involved in this situation, the easier it's going to be for everybody.
Thanks. Val?
Yeah. Well, I think that having been involved with the planning group committee, I think for quite a while now, I tend to see that one of the things is that almost every town that is of this size has a very, very public sort of front door, which is the first view that everybody gets of it, the understanding that the public has, the people who don't live there, but the people who maybe live nearby, the people who might potentially bring business and things to a town. And then there's the sort of hidden gems. And I think Caroline has one front door, which is Route 79, which is what everybody knows. And it's a very linear stretch that almost bisects, but not exactly, like 1/3, 2/3 or something, the area of the town. And it's where most of the people who go to Ithaca or go anywhere across state, how they see Caroline and how they judge Caroline and how they would potentially treat Caroline. And my concern is with what happens with those kinds of front doors in especially a lot of rural communities, that they begin to become they begin, what I would call the junk is where things begin to arrive, all sorts of strange, boxes and things that you could be anywhere in the entire country. And then what happens then is also, I find that those things end up sort of leeching business away from things like hamlets. And we have some really great hamlets, I think, in here town. Only one of them, Sladeville Springs, is on that road. And Sladeville Springs used to be a spa. It used to be a spa town. It actually had a beautiful main street that unfortunately was lost to fire at one point. But I think that what happens is that the more things that go the wrong way, the less people are inclined to look for those sort of gems, and things like in Brooktondale and Speedville and other places. And I think we should really find both a way to allow those areas to develop to their capacity or to their abilities, and then at the same time be able to keep the first impression, I suppose, a positive one. And then there's the backdoor things, the things that are even further, which is, I think, I agree, the parks and the state forest, all the trails that we have and the things that where people can go out into the wilderness is a real great asset here. And it's something that we've used and our children have used and everything, all those years. So that's what my concept is.
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, I guess I don't feel like I have a lot to add here. I think I agree with everybody. And I think what comes to my mind is what we want. Well, I'll just say what I want, but we want to protect the individuality that we have in this community. I feel like that's kind of what everybody's saying. And I feel like there are a lot of pressures from outside businesses, corporations, on communities that don't have plans or zoning. And they're the most vulnerable to losing what makes them, they're vulnerable to losing the individuality creating things unless they're protected. And I think we've reached a point that, we can't just say, well, we can protect ourselves without something a little more formal. I just don't think that works. Yeah, I guess I kind of especially agree with what Val said about seeing the junk. And by junk, it's like this, to me, these outside, forces and they're what they produce. And it kind of puts everybody down. So, yeah, so I guess just not to keep rambling on, I would say that we want to protect the individuality that we find in this community. I think we all really enjoy this community. That's why we've stayed here so long. And, it's a fun place to live, but, it won't be fun if it's just becomes homogenous, just kind of. And I agree with Bruce about involving the public, but I think you have to have something to offer. Otherwise, it just becomes, I would think, a really chaotic process. And so hopefully our neighbors trust us to love this place as much as they do and, to produce something that's worth commenting on. And
Yeah.
I guess that's it.
Thanks. I will go next and say that for me, it's very much about protecting water quality. We have an aquifer which runs very much under Route 79, and or at least through part of the town. And we have some big wetlands. That's one thing. And then the thing that I love most about Caroline is the shape of the hills. It means home to me. And Daniel and I have lived here for 50 years. We have a relatively big piece of land, 26 acres. But it gladdens my heart when I just drove through Slaterville Springs the other day and I see a new house going up on a very tiny parcel. And, it's an infill project, and I think it's great to have a house coming there. I also, as I was out delivering light bulbs, we have this project here to try to get people to have LED light bulbs, and there's a grant to deliver them to people. And, I saw several new houses in places that I don't think I even knew existed before I went out to deliver some of these light bulbs. It's a big piece of land, and it has two big state forests in it, Shindagan and a part of Hammond Hill. And we have, as Val was saying, great trails. The Cayuga, the Finger Lakes Trail runs through here. I'm hoping that we'll have a trail that will connect to other trails that go all the way into Ithaca for bicycles and pedestrians. And I want people to have that same individuality that I think Michelle was talking about. I don't envision a plan that says you have to have 5 acres or you have to have 2 acres or whatever you have to have. I think we have to figure out a way to allow families to live here and families to share land with their children and others. So that's what I want. So let me see, Tim as our liaison, and you have something you want to add?
I think one of the things that I just would add that I'm not sure I heard spoken is that if you compare residential statistics across the town, I think we're the second leading growth town in the county, which might
Yeah.
surprise people. And so I think it's important for us to take into consideration that we are experiencing significant growth relative to the other rural towns in the county. And I think that that's something that has catalyzed a lot of the conversation around planning and land use and enthusiasm for the town over the past, let's say, 5 years. And I do think it's fair to say that the town has changed dramatically since those early days when the town board invited me to leave the town after I presented a petition to them about junk in about 1988 and told me if I didn't like it, I should leave. We're really in a different place right now, and we have a very, very dialogical town. And I think we're all open to hearing that dialogism. I'm sounding like a literature professor, sorry.
We'll forgive you for that sin. Mark, you're attending the meeting tonight. Is there something you want to add?
No, I think everybody spoke well, and I appreciated the comments. So no, I'll just stay on to listen.
Okay. Great. I'll turn this back over to Nan then.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing all of those thoughts with you. And we'll certainly, it's really important hearing that and learning about your perspectives, and that will help us a lot in understanding, what our suggestions and recommendations would be for you. So I wanted to just take a couple minutes, and I don't know, Jean, if you can put that, if everyone either has or you can put it up. I don't know if you need to share it.
I can put it up.
Around. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was kind of up to speed, and I don't know how much you have already talked about what does the zoning law look like? What are its components? And so I did up a little sheet for you that got passed around that has the major components of a zoning law. The ones that are in black are pretty either required or pretty standard pieces. In many of these things, there are some required components of a zoning law that once you have zoning, for instance, you have to have a zoning board of appeals. The items in here that are in green are certainly items that may or may not be in there. You know, you may choose not to have an extensive set of regulations, say for dimensions, as you have talked about tonight. Mark, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just going to chime in here. Jean, are you having trouble sharing?
No, I'm going to be able to get it up in a second.
Okay, I also gave co-hosting to Nan as well.
Oh.
So you should be able to share if you wish, but either way.
What would you like to do, Jean? Do you want me to give it a try?
Yes, please. I'm having trouble getting it out.
Okay, let's see if I can.
And Mark, you're not muted.
Is it up?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is a general outline of a zoning law. You'll see variations from community to community, but in essence, these are the things that pretty much every zoning law has. It starts with kind of the legal underpinnings of things, the title, the applicability. You know, we have some legal things. The law will not become effective until it's filed with the New York State Department of State. That's all kind of front loaded in here. Not an awful lot of discussion or needs. You know, there's kind of pro forma kind of information. The purpose statement, and I probably should have the purpose statement, the purpose section, half in green and half in black. It's in black because every zoning law has to have a purpose statement. So it's really required. And I think the purpose statements are one of the most important parts of the zoning law, because those statements reflect what you as a community want. In my opinion, the days of a zoning law simply saying the purpose of having this zoning law is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community is not anywhere near where we need to be. And in fact, the task force purpose statements that were, if you can look at what the site plan update purpose statements were really excellent. And those, we might just use many of those. They capture the real essence of why you want to have zoning. So the purpose statements is where we really are going to start right off the bat, and make sure that you all agree that this is the statement of why we are going to regulate land in whatever way you ultimately end up. I've put a lot of effort in emphasis on the purpose statements. And the important thing is that so do courts. So if there were ever an issue related to anything in your zoning law and the town got sued, or the review board made a decision that then there was an Article 78, the first thing the court does is look at the purpose statements to see whether the regulation is grounded in some public goal. So these purpose statements are critical. They are kind of like the goal statements in your comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan should be reflected in these purpose statements, and it sets the stage for everything that follows. The other thing that is required, but also up to you, is definitions. I am a real advocate for lots of definitions. If you look through any of my other communities that I've done zoning, you will see lots of definitions. And that's because it's the definitions that help everybody understand the words that this law will have in it. The definitions are critical for that. And when you have vague definitions, unclear definitions, or missing definitions, that's what breeds confusion. It breeds lawsuits. It breeds unnecessary trips to the Zoning Board of Appeals because people don't understand what you meant by something. So that is something that we will work on, and we will be adding definitions throughout the whole process. If people say, well, what do you mean by whatever? And we will add the definition. In my approach, you can't have too many definitions. So they're really, really important. The zoning districts, so every zoning law has two required components. One is the text and one is the map. And so the map is a critical and required piece of the zoning law. Even if you, and I'm not saying this is what you do, but even if you decided that the entire town is just going to be one big zoning district and you're not going to have anything else, you still have to have a map. So the map, whatever it turns out to be, will be part of the zoning law. And you may choose to have a variety of primary districts, hamlet district, or focus area. The focus areas that you talk about in your comprehensive plan may turn into hamlet districts. You may have a rural district or an agricultural district. I don't know what those are yet. Overlay districts are often districts that are keyed to specific resources. You might have a floodplain overlay district, or you may have a sensitive environmental area overlay district, or you may have a ridgeline protection overlay district. And the overlay district focuses certain development standards to protect those resources. So you may find, you know, as we go along, you may find that you're gravitating towards using overlay districts to protect some of the things that you're passionate about. Some communities have floating districts. I will certainly, you know, we can talk about them. I'm not particularly a fan of them because I think they can be abused and twisted, and they often result in things unintended. Basically, a floating district is something you say, well, we would like to have a business district, but we don't really have a place for it now, but we're going to set it up in the zoning, and someone can come along and propose to the town board that they would like to establish a business district in a certain location. It has its place, and you may find that it's useful for you. We'll have to work through some of that. So anyway, those are all talked about in the zoning district section. The land use section is where you articulate what land uses you are going to permit and where. So you might say, well, we want to have home occupations everywhere, but we're not going to allow retail sales in, you know, some other location. So this is completely, the use table is completely tied to the district. So we'll be working through what are the land uses that are acceptable. Some communities are very prescriptive and they have pages and pages of uses that are allowed in different districts. Some communities are much more general and they'll have a line that says retail sales, or they'll have a sign that says service business, or they'll have a sign that says agriculture, whatever. So again, those are all areas that we're going to have to work through to see how detailed and how you want to handle those things. The density and dimensions it may be light. You may not want to get very much into it, but that is a section that is completely up for you all to decide whether you want any lot restrictions, setbacks, frontages. There's pluses and minuses to any of those things, but that will get discussed in the density and dimensions section. And the supplemental regulations would be some rural zoning laws have them and some don't. It might be that you say, well, for all districts everywhere in town, we have these performance expectations. Or you might say in the Hamlet district, these are the development standards. You know, we want to have design guidelines for specific to each Hamlet district. That's where that would go. And then the standards for selected uses, you may say, well, we want to discuss home occupations. And so we want to talk about individual standards for home occupations, and you would have whatever you want to say about them, or junkyard, or, you know, gas stations. Any number of things can be specifically discussed that you might want to pull out and have some sort of development standards for. The review procedures are, I have this in green because you don't have to have them in the zoning law, although I certainly recommend that you do. This is where we would put the site plan review section, so it's integrated in. And you will have to decide whether you want to have some uses that are permitted by a special use. And that's a whole nother review process that a special use would be something that is a permitted use in town, but it might have some sort of characteristic that it needs some extra review and extra development standards for. So we're going to have to talk about whether you want to use the special use permit technique in procedures or not. And then the remaining pieces are really necessary components. The non-conforming buildings, uses, and lots, we basically have to have the zoning say, what happens if the zoning creates lots that don't fit in this right, what we just wrote. And so the non-conforming section, most rural communities say, you're fine, we're gonna let you stay just the way you are, keep going the way you are, we're not gonna make you change anything. But development that comes from the point where you adopt the law forward will have to meet the new zoning requirements. So that's what the non-conforming section is. The Zoning Board of Appeals is critical. You will have to have a Zoning Board of Appeals. And the language that we use in the Zoning Board of Appeals section pretty much comes directly from the state authorizing legislation. There's not an awful lot that you can edit, and I don't recommend that you do a lot of editing. It's a quasi judicial kind of function. They have very specific tasks and very specific criteria that they use, and it's all laid out in state law. So that will have to be in there and you will review it, but there's not an awful lot that you're going to be able to write into the ZBA section. The enforcement is basically, I don't know, do you have a building inspector or a code enforcement officer in town? So I see your heads shaking. So this is where we would write in who is the person that's expected to enforce the law, what kind of procedures will there be to enforce this law. Is it going to be the building inspector? Is it going to be a zoning officer? So we have to have an enforcement section, although you will have, so this is another one that could be part black, part green. As you will have a lot to say about how the law is enforced, but we have to have something in there about how the law is enforced. And then the last piece that goes into it is the law has to say for the future how it will get amended. And so this is a section that outlines the procedures for amending the zoning law in the future. So that is like a really quick, fast 101 into the components of the zoning law. And I know that that was like really fast, but I wanted to give you all, you know, a little bit of background on kind of the sections that we'll be working towards and discussing as we go along. And we'll be taking each one of these as we progress through the process.
Okay, I see that Evie has her hand up.
Sorry, I couldn't get my mute off. Yeah, Nan, that was great. Could you give an example of some things that would require special use permits?
Yeah, so, and I actually have not read your solar law yet, so I'm unsure of what's in it, but many communities would require a solar farm that is less than the one that the state, smaller in size than what the state regulates, would be something that you would allow, but you would require a special use permit to have an extra layer of review. Special use permits are often uses such as gas stations is another example. Like gas stations are a use you might want in town, but because they're potentially polluting, they're potentially heavy duty uses, a lot of traffic coming in and out. They could have visual impact because of the way they often look. You might want a special use permit for something like that. So that's just like two examples out of, you know, many. Multi-family housing, like if you wanted to have apartment buildings, they're often special use permits in the rural community. You don't have to have it that way, but that's another example of one.
So thank you. Those just so I'm clear on this, those tend to be, do they tend to be more commercially oriented?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes. You know, a single family residence or a 2-family residence, I I don't think I've ever seen them as a special use permit. They're usually permitted, just, you know, just their allowed uses. So yeah, so they're very commercially oriented, and the special use permit and the site plan review often go hand in hand, work together.
Thank you.
Great. I think, Nan, this is where you were going to go on to the GIS and that. So is this
Yep.
Rick now?
This is
Okay.
Rick now.
Okay, thanks. So Nan sort of went through some of the things that the mapping covers. So for the GIS mapping, you know, we'll look at a number of factors. There's all the things that were mentioned at the beginning that you're all concerned about. We'll be looking at existing development patterns, densities, things like that. You know, if we decide, if you all decide that you want to have dimensional requirements, acreage requirements, things like that, you know, using the data to look at what you currently have and sort of using that as sort of a building block for what makes sense, we would do that. But a lot of it probably will be, you know, the environmental factors, whether it's, you know, looking at, Nan focused on the comprehensive plan. I focused on looking at the NRI and the climate vulnerability assessment. And it's clear from both of those that there are certain factors in the town that are of higher priority that seem to be, that come to the forefront, flooding being one of them. And so I believe Nan alluded to it, but you know, we might decide as a group that having like a flood overlay district that has certain requirements, and not just looking at the existing FEMA floodplains, because those are, you know, outdated already just because of how old they are, but also, you know, thinking about changing weather patterns and you know, areas that are mapped as flood prone now. You know, it's probably much more than that. And you know, I saw groundwater flooding as an issue, and so we may look at, you know, one thing to look at is like riparian areas, because that's important for both flooding and habitat protection. You know, it's possible, you know, the state already has a riparian buffer layer that they created a couple of years ago for the whole state, which I won't get into all the background on how they created it, but it's not just a straight buffer off of streams. They took into account soil types and topography and things like that. And so, you know, that may be a starting point to look at as a possible overlay type of thing. You know, habitats, you know, forests, things like that. You know, there's, you know, if there's species of concern, if there's wetlands of concern, things like that. You know, we may look at those things to create an overlay. And mentioned ridge lines. That's another factor that comes up in a lot of towns. So, you know, it may be that we draw distinct boundaries, you know, based on current development and, you know, using natural features and parcel lines and things like that. Or as Nan said, you know, we may end up with one overall district for the whole town and then some overlays based on different features. So we'll see how it goes as we go along. But the map obviously will be important to show where those things are. You know, often with overlays, you know, we have the map, but then there's also a description if it's something that's, you know, if it's 500 feet from the center line of a stream or something like that. We'll show it on the map, but that'll also be something in the text. So, and you know, most of the data that we would need is readily available. But in looking through your NRI, there actually are some layers that were referenced that were provided by the county that the county doesn't have on their website freely available. So we'll look to you to either put us in touch with someone to get those layers or have you get them for us. But I think there was only 4. Probably the most critical was the county did their own wetland mapping, which most of you I'm sure are aware of. That is a higher quality, if you will, than the state and federal mapping. So we would definitely want that layer. aquifers. The plan mentioned, the NRI mentioned that the county has an aquifer layer that's similar to the state layer, but not exactly the same. So we would certainly want to take a look at that. Unique natural areas, and then the scenic layer that they create that has the distinctive characteristic and noteworthy views. If we want to think about view sheds, and if we want the zoning to incorporate anything about scenic views and things like that, we'd want to take a look at those locations and what the views from those locations are. Again, if you wanted to have like a scenic overlay or something like that. So that's in a nutshell. Like I said, it's hard to know yet what the map's going to look like because we don't know if it's going to be one big district and maybe some hamlet districts, or if it's going to be varying uses and densities and things like that, or if it's going to be a series of overlays. And I can guarantee it won't be like some towns where I've seen it have 20 different zoning districts. It's not going to look like that for sure.
No.
But whether it's 1 or 5 or somewhere in the middle, yet to see. So
Thanks. Anyone have any questions for Rick or Nan before we go on a little bit? Okay. Evie. Mute. Unmute. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm curious, and this may be a very premature question, but I'm curious how, when there's a resource like, say, for example, the 6 Mile Creek, which is a very important source of all kinds of things for the community, when boundaries change, how does that change in turn? How do you handle that sort of thing with respect to the ordinance that may evolve to protect areas as you've had that maybe in other communities?
Do you want to address that, Nan, or?
Pardon?
Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
I was going to say, like I said, there's the map, but then there's also text in the zoning law that would say, like if it's an overlay district, that would define how that overlay district is defined. So if it's a certain number of feet from the edge of the river or the creek, and the creek moves, then that the document covers that because it's 500 feet from the edge of the creek, whether the creek is over here or over here. That's how it would be addressed. Ideally, the map would be updated to reflect that change. But if it's something that's frequently moving, obviously that could present a problem. But yeah, we would make sure that's covered in the text of the zoning document, so someone can't, if the zoning law doesn't get updated for 10 years and the creek shifts 50 feet and the map hasn't been updated, at least in the text of the document it would say 500 feet from the stream edge, for instance, which is something that can be measured no matter when you're looking at it.
And that is a really good kind of segue into something, especially for those of you who are on the town board. I do not believe that a zoning law is static, meaning that when you adopt it in 2022, that's not what you're going to have for the next 20 years. And that as you use the law, the review board, the town board, and others will find things that we didn't address, or that you need updating, or something has changed in the community. And I really think that the town board needs to go into this process with a acceptance that there will be changes, and that on an annual basis or every other year, you will gather the boards in the community to evaluate what's working and what's not working, and do a series of small incremental changes to address the issues that has arisen. The worst thing that you can do is adopt a zoning law and never address the issues. And 20 years later, it's not working at all. And instead of small fixes, you basically have to rewrite it. So my advice is you go into this with the understanding that you're going to continue the discussions with the community, with the review board, with the town board. And, you know, the review board will say, oh, you know, there's a definition that someone came forward with this great idea and we never thought of it, you know. So there will be things, I can absolutely guarantee you, there will be things that you will have to tweak. And so you shouldn't, you know, just kind of say, oh, wow, shoo, we adopted the zoning law, it's done. It's not done. It's something that needs careful attention on a regular basis.
Okay, as they say, attention must be paid. So, so I'm gonna move us to the next section of our agenda, which was places that we think that Nan and Rick should see when they come visit, and I want to talk about their coming to visit in the future. So, can you all see this? So this is ask people to send me some ideas of places that we should see. Basically, Route 79 from end to end. And I have noticed that there is no on 79 down towards Bessemer, there's no sign that says where the town starts. So I basically starts where the town says Bessemer, and all the way to the county line. Brooktondale and Valley Road through the hamlet of Brooktondale, which is probably our biggest hamlet, I would say. Central Chapel Road from Brooktondale to Shadagan Hollow, which will show you one of the forests, and then maybe up over Leonard Road and left on Bald Hill Road and right on Groveskill Road. And you've seen some of the places where things are going to go, like cell towers are going up there. I then put in 3 websites that I thought would be useful to look at. The Tour 6 Mile Creek website is neighbors of ours, but it has some great aerial views of the town that were taken by drone over some period of time, and it gives you a really good view of 6 Mile Creek, which is a major feature. It starts in Dryden, it ends in Ithaca, but you'll see a lot of it. And then 2 geohydrology things about aquifers, about our aquifer from the USGS. And then Evie suggested Perkins Road and University Sand and Gravel operation, which is up above Brooktondale. And there's and we'll show you, I think that's our only sand and gravel thing in our town, but I wouldn't swear to God. Shindigan Hollow, there are lots of other roads that are down there in Shindigan. Boyceville is a cluster housing community that has been known through time as Smurf Village, and also because they're very adorable little houses. So the inhabitants are not blue, but you know, there you are. But like 100 different residences in there or so, and it's in a relatively small piece of land. So that's our big cluster housing. Slaterville Road again, out to Harford and road to the town end. Hammond Hill State Forest, which is on the north side of Route 79. And it's a very big state forest. A lot of it is in the town of Dryden. There's also a small county forest near Level Green Road. I wanted to say, how are we going to see the future possible Caroline Trail? Maybe, no, I have no idea how you would do that. So then Barbara suggested looking at the comprehensive plan and the maps that are in there, the roads that you want to see, and the things that you want to see about the topography and the soils and the farmland. And also that you need to drive in both directions often in order to really get a sense of the views and the vistas and the vista changes. So I will send this to you as a document, but to everyone, so that you'll have this. And if there's anything you wanted to add, we can do that. Tim, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, I'm very sorry, Jean, that I didn't see your email about this until too late, but I think I would recommend that they include a loop off of around 79 from Lounsbury Road to Landon Road and back up to 79, which is a kind of unique combination of agriculture and housing in the town, and also an area that's been subject to discussion. It'll take you 4 minutes to do that.
And there's an adorable sheep farm on there, which has
There is.
absolutely the cutest lambs in the world right now. They're like doing this kind of bouncing where they just bounce. You know, they're quite cute. So please, if anybody has anything else, just send them to me and I will add them to this and just keep sending it out. But and I think one of the things I included was in terms of a view, if you're coming down through Burktondale, going up over Burns Road, which is a U-shaped road, it has a really good view of Boyceville from on top, and also of that valley. So I'm not as familiar with the northern part of the town as I am with the southern part. So I know Val lives over there. I'm not sure who else lives over there, but if you've got specific things that you want to suggest, please do that. And Nan and Tim raised his hand again. So yes.
Yeah, I was going to just suggest that at the far eastern end of Route 79 is the area that we generally call Caroline. And one of the things that I might recommend is, so I just don't have the road names right now, but there's a left in the center of that, and it loops around to what's called the Hartford Road, and then comes all the way back down to Sliderville Springs. And that's also a really interesting agricultural area in the
maybe
town.
Flatiron, is that what you're thinking about?
Yes, I think it's Flatiron. Yes, thanks, Jean.
Flatiron Road to Hartford Road and back around. Yeah. Okay. I love that name, Flatiron. I think it's a great name. Good. So Nan and Rick, have you thought about when you want to come to do this drive around? And also, should we try to schedule something like a longer meeting sometime when you can come, or we can do this by Zoom, where we start to do what you suggested we need to do first?
Well, we have next Wednesday, June 2nd on our calendars. I mean, unless it's like horrendous, like horrible weather, we are planning on coming out to do our drive around. And I think that our next, and I don't necessarily, we kind of like to poke around and view things. So I don't think we need to meet with anybody for that drive around. That's why we wanted your input on where to go.
Okay.
In terms of your next meeting, I think that you had that down for June 8th. And what I wanted to do for that meeting, Rick and I are putting together a matrix, I guess you could call it a matrix or a table, that pulls out from your comprehensive plan all of the features and the goals of items that could be related to zoning, so that you could kind of use that as a checklist, and we could talk about what of those components you would like to address in the zoning, and then probably start on the purpose statements right off the bat, because that's pretty foundational. So I think that, you know, my opinion is doing a Zoom meeting once you guys all have those materials and you can think about it. We can still do good discussions about how you want those to read. And so I think that would be for the next meeting.
Okay, that sounds great. I did note in the number here, if you go through Burktondale, you can have lunch at the Brooktons Market.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Yeah, we'll definitely need to do that.
Yeah. It's either that or the gas stations. I cannot recommend their cuisine.
Okay.
So, so anyway, but the Brookton's Market I can recommend. So great. I think that sounds terrific. If anyone has thoughts about the June 8th meeting and wants to get in touch with me, because Nan and I will probably work on an agenda for that, and try to get that out, relatively. You may want to think about the agenda after you've done the drive around.
Okay.
So maybe the next day we could try to run through that, what the agenda will be.
Sounds good.
I think that sounds good. Good. So anybody want to say anything? I'm trying to flip through these pictures. Tim has got his hand waving in the air.
I'm sorry, there's one kind of important item that I forgot to mention in my town board report at the beginning.
Sure.
We're currently under a moratorium for commercial development, land use and commercial development that expires in June. So the town board, in consultation with our attorney, is proposing a new land use moratorium extension local law. Our attorney has recommended that we extend the law for 15 months. We may not need all of that, but he thought it would make a lot of sense for us to give ourselves breathing room to do this correctly, because he puts it, this is the most pivotal thing that's happening to the town probably in its existence. So we're going to hold a public hearing on this on June 1st at 7 p.m., which is before our June 1st agenda meeting. And I just wanted to call that to your attention in case you would like to attend that public hearing and speak your mind.
Thank you. Nan and Rick, the thing that I heard and didn't comment at the time when I think it was Tim who said that Sladeville used to be a spa town, and it was because there are artesian wells here, and it was in Sladeville. And there was, at that time, people, believed if you drank really nasty tasting water, it was great for you. However, as far as I can see from the artesian well we have, it tastes good. So, but there is an artesian well right outside of the town hall, and many people come and get their water from it still. I think that was the only thing. However, I would say in my heart of hearts, I would like to win an award from like Sherwin-Williams and repaint Sladeville Springs. It's a little goal I have, because I think all of those houses could look quite beautiful if they were repainted in fabulous colors. So there you are.
Troy, New York is having an HBO series shot there, and they repainted the downtown. So maybe we could ask HBO to come.
We'll talk. But I just think that would be fabulous. So anyway, that's what we have. Any final comments for the evening?
Yeah, Jean?
Yep.
You'll send a copy of this list?
Yes, I'm going to send you the copy of this list, and I'm going to send you Nan and Rick's proposal. So you'll have that as well.
I might add something after I go over this list a few times.
Okay, that's fine. Good. Thank you.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, we can take additions to the list up to, send out an email. As long as I have a cell signal, we can get updates to it as we're driving.
Well, even on Route 79, you may have problems with cells. That's how life is here. It's not for the. You have to be hardy out here. So
no, I totally get that.
Good. Have a wonderful time when you come. And if you need anything when you're here, call any one of us and we'd be happy to help. And we'll see everyone in 2 weeks. Okay.
Okay. Thank
Good night.
you. Nice meeting everybody.
Thanks,
Yep.
Nan.
Thanks
Rick.
so much.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.